to never be the same again.
Elliot Granger learned 2 things the summer his mother died. The world was far quieter without her laughter. And nothing in Briar Edge stayed quiet for long. He moved back into his childhood home in late August, intending only to pack the place up and put it on the market. His mother's death had been sudden. A heart attack, the coroner said. But the townsfolk whispered something different behind closed doors. "Did you hear? They say she was raving about insects." "Not insects, bees," said they were watching her. Elliot didn't believe rumors and never had. But he did believe grief made people see patterns that weren't there. He assumed it would all fade the longer he stayed. But Briar Edge had a way of bringing things to the surface whether you wanted them or not. The house smelled the same as it had when he was a child. Lavender, dust, and the faint sweetness of the orchard behind the garden. He spent the first few days sorting through his mother's things, finding old letters and forgotten photos, each one pulling at him like threads from a fraying jumper. But then he found the notebook. It was tucked inside the drawer of her bedside table, pages swollen with humidity and covered in frantic handwriting. At first, he thought it was her daily journal. She had kept one for years, usually neat, tidy, almost obsessively organized. This one wasn't. The pages were filled with sketches of bees. Thousands of them. Swarms blotted in black ink. Hives scribbled with violent strokes. Wings drawn so frantically they looked like claw marks. And beneath each picture a single repeated phrase. "It's not the sting. It's the breath." He nearly closed the book right then, chalking it up to stress or medication confusion. But a scrap of paper fluttered free from the back and landed at his feet. Written in a shaky hand was a message. "If I become one of them, don't bury me. Burn the body. They live in the lungs." Elliot sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, the room pressing in around him. He didn't know what disturbed him more, that his mother believed this, or that she had been terrified enough to write it down. The hum started the following night. It was soft at first, almost like electricity through thin walls, or a refrigerator left open. Elliot heard it as he lay in bed, drifting between sleep and thought. He assumed it was the old wiring in the house. But then it grew lower, deeper, almost like dozens of tiny throats vibrating in unison. He sat up, heart thudding. The sound was coming from outside. He pulled back the curtains. The moonlit garden was empty, gently waving with tall grass and wildflowers. But the hum was everywhere. Thick as syrup, vibrating in his teeth. He stepped out onto the porch and listened. Then, silence, as sudden as a switch being flipped. He waited in the cool night air, listening for anything. Wings, rustling leaves, a passing car. But Briar Edge was a rural town. Once night fell, it became a vacuum. He eventually went back inside, telling himself it was nothing. He was wrong. The next morning, he walked to the village shop for milk and bread. Briar Edge was the same as ever. Old stone cottages, overgrown hedges, and local gossip louder than the church bells. But today, people were whispering more intensely than usual. Mrs. Halper, who ran the shop, greeted Elliot with a sad smile. "You're back, love. Hard times. Your mother was a good woman." "Thank you," he murmured. "What's going on today? Feels tense." She hesitated. "It's old Bertie. They found him on the roadside." Elliot stiffened. "Dead?" "No, worse." She leaned in, voice a wavering whisper. "They say he bit the paramedic." Elliot blinked. "What?" "A proper bite too. Tore into the poor lad's arm like an animal." "That doesn't." "And his skin, Elliot? Grey as stone." eyes all milky, breath rattling like he'd swallowed a hive. A cold chill crept up Elliot's spine. "What?" he said again, quieter. "They've taken him to St. Jude's Hospital in the city. But between you and me," she crossed herself, "that man ain't sick the normal way." Elliot paid for the groceries, his mind buzzing. On the walk back home, he couldn't shake the image of old Bertie, a harmless old gardener known for feeding birds and telling children ghost stories, suddenly turning vicious, a rattling breath, just like his mother had described. He thought of her notebook lying on the bed. Milky eyes, grey skin. They live in the lungs. Later that night, Elliot ventured outside with a torch, determined to see where the dead bees had come from. The garden was still, the air crisp. But the moment he stepped past the shed, the hum returned. He followed the sound through the tall grass, breath steaming in the cool night, until he reached the orchard his parents had planted when he was small. Then he saw it. The beehive, or what was left of it. The wooden frame hung from the apple tree, like a rotting organ. Wax had melted into malformed drips. Hive cells bulged outward like boils ready to burst. And inside, he could see movement. Not the gentle glide of bees. Not the busy flickers of workers. No, the things inside were shuddering. Twisting, their wings vibrating as if they were trying to rip themselves apart. A single bee crawled out of a ruptured cell. Its legs shook violently. Its abdomen bulged, splitting slightly. Something dark, almost smoke-like, pulsed beneath its exoskeleton. Elliot stumbled back, choking on panic. A crackle rose from the hive, then another, and suddenly the entire structure pulsed outward like a living lung. And it exhaled. A cloud erupted from the hive, not of bees but of spores, black powdery, dancing like soot through the moonlit air. Elliot covered his mouth and backpedaled. The cloud drifted, carried by the breeze, straight toward the village. "No," he rasped. "No, no, no." Another pulse. Another exhale. The hive wasn't a hive anymore. It was an incubator, and Briar Edge was downwind. Elliot ran back home, locked every door and window, and pressed his back to the wall, gasping. But then he heard it, the distant hum, growing louder, spreading through the hills and fields, carried on the infected wind. It cracked through the hedges, slithered across the rooftops, and slunk between the cottages. And then, screams. Short, clipped, strained. One by one, lights flicked on across the village. Shadows moved in the windows. People stumbled from their homes, clutching their chests, coughing violently as though trying to expel something. The coughs turned to gags. The gags turned to shrieks. And the shrieks turned to buzzing. Dozens of villagers dropped to their knees, clawing at their throats as black filaments crawled up their tongues, pulsing like veins alive with something hungry. Elliot could only watch from behind the curtains as the first infected rose, bodies stiff and trembling, eyes white as flowers left in the frost. Their breathing vibrated, rasping, hissing, humming, a hive's chorus contained in human lungs. And as they staggered forward, bees poured from their mouths, dead ones, weak ones, skin crawling with larvae that burrowed beneath the flesh, writhing inside the veins like tiny worms building a nest. The infected moved in one direction, toward the source of the hive's call, toward Elliot's house. The front door handle began to turn. Slowly, methodically. Elliot grabbed a chair and shoved it under the knob. He stumbled backwards, scanning the room for something, anything, he could weaponize. His mother's notebook lay on the kitchen table. He snatched it up and flipped to the last page. In her frantic handwriting, 3 sentences were scrawled over and over. They don't want blood. They want breath. The dead spread the air. The door rattled violently. Wood splintered. Glass cracked. The infected were pushing, clawing, shoving their shoulders against the doorframe. One eye peered through the window, milky, swollen, twitching with larvae beneath the surface. Elliot backed down the hallway and into the cellar, slamming the door behind him. He barricaded it with old crates, then stumbled down the steps into the cool darkness below. The house trembled overhead as the infected forced their way inside. The hum seeped through the floorboards like a living vibration. He held his breath, not daring to inhale the air. Above him, footsteps shuffled, bodies dragged, and in a chorus of rattling lungs, he heard them whisper, "Be." Then the cellar door creaked, hinges straining. Something heavy slammed into the barricade. Once, twice, again, and again. The wood began to crack. Elliot closed his eyes. His last thought before the door exploded inward was not of death, but of how right his mother had been. Bees were never meant to infect humans. Something had changed them. Something had evolved them. Something had awakened. As the infected villagers approached, Elliot backed away from the window. The air outside was thick with spores, visible now, drifting like black snow in the moonlight. His phone buzzed. It was Dr. Thorne. He answered with shaking hands. "Doctor, you need to quarantine the village. Right now." "There's something I know," she said breathlessly. "The paramedic who was bitten. He collapsed. His lungs burst. Elliot, the autopsy shows microscopically small spores embedded in the alveoli. They replicate like fungus but behave like parasites. They're coming from bees," Elliot said. "From mutated hives." "That's impossible." "No," he snapped. "It's happening right now." Her breath stuttered on the other end. "What symptoms do you see?" "Spasms, milky eyes, grey skin, and..." He swallowed hard. "They're breathing like hives, vibrating like something inside them is..." Then the doctor whispered, "That means the spores have reached the thoracic cavity." "Which means what?" "It means the infected aren't breathing anymore. The spores are generating air pressure artificially. They're turning the lungs into incubation chambers." Elliot gagged at the thought. "And the infected are drawn to others," Dr. Thorne continued. "We observed it in the paramedic before he collapsed. It may be a behavioral manipulation, like how parasites guide their hosts." "Doctor," Elliot whispered, voice trembling, "what happens next?" Then, the lungs rupture, and everything inside them spreads. Outside, the infected villagers were gathering on his front lawn, heads twitching towards him in broken, puppet-like movements. Their mouths opened in unison, and the hum rose to a deafening roar.
If you enjoyed tonight's tale, remember to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves a good scare.